Imagine an empire of fierce warriors, feared across continents, suddenly making a choice that would change the course of history, not through conquest, but through faith. This is the story of how a powerful kingdom, standing between great civilizations, faced a decision that would define its identity forever. Surrounded by Christian Byzantium and the Islamic Caliphates, they could have chosen either side. Instead, they carved a new path, embracing a faith that had no empire, no armies, and no worldly power. Join us as we uncover how a warrior empire chose a new faith and shocked the world. The unlikely choice. History is not a straight line. It is a tapestry woven with unexpected turns, astonishing decisions, and bold experiments in identity. Among the great surprises of world history is the story of the Khazar Empire, a warrior state that rose in the steppes of Eurasia between the 7th and 10th centuries. What makes the Khazars unforgettable is not merely their military prowess or their control of trade routes. It is the decision of their ruling elite to adopt Judaism at a time when the world seemed divided between two powerful religious empires, the Christian Byzantine Empire to the west and the Islamic Caliphates to the south and east. This decision was nothing short of shocking. To choose Judaism, a faith long associated with exile, persecution, and marginality, was to reject the security of aligning with the world's dominant powers. Yet in that rejection lay the Khazars' independence and a legacy that still echoes today. Chapter 1. The World of Two Faiths. By the 8th century, the Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds were dominated by two faiths that also carried imperial strength. Christianity had become the backbone of the Byzantine Empire, with Constantinople as its radiant center. Islam, born in Arabia in the 7th century, had spread with astonishing speed, establishing a vast caliphate that stretched from Spain to Central Asia. For rulers caught between these two powers, religion was more than belief. It was politics, strategy, and survival. To adopt Christianity often meant falling into Byzantium's orbit. To adopt Islam often meant joining the expanding Islamic world. In both cases, religious identity came with political consequences. The Khazars, positioned in the Caucasus and steppe, were at the crossroads of this world. They could trade with both empires, fight either one, or balance carefully between them. Their land connected Europe to Asia, making them gatekeepers of the Silk Road and the Volga trade networks. With such a position, every choice they made carried weight far beyond their borders. Chapter 2. Who were the Khazars? The Khazars were a Turkic-speaking people who rose to prominence after the collapse of the earlier nomadic powers of the steppe. Like the Huns before them and the Mongols after them, they built an empire out of mobility, cavalry strength, and control of trade. But unlike some steppe conquerors, the Khazars did not simply raid and disappear. They built cities, collected taxes, and established a structured administration. Their capital, Itil, located near the Volga River Delta, was a cosmopolitan hub where Muslims, Christians, Jews, and pagans lived side by side. Travelers reported marketplaces filled with goods from distant lands, furs from the north, silks from the east, spices from the south. The Khazars were not only warriors, they were merchants, diplomats, and power brokers. Their role as middlemen enriched them, but also placed them under constant scrutiny. The Byzantines wanted them as allies against Muslim powers. The Caliphates wanted them as partners or subjects. Both wanted their allegiance in faith as well as politics. Chapter 3. The Shocking Decision. Sometime in the late 8th or early 9th century, the Khazar rulers made a decision that stunned the medieval world. They converted to Judaism. The details are shrouded in mystery. Some sources speak of a royal debate in which representatives of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism were invited to argue their case before the Khagan, the Khazar ruler. After hearing them, the Khagan is said to have chosen Judaism, reasoning that it was the oldest of the Abrahamic faiths and not tied to any current empire. Whether the story is literal or symbolic, it captures the essence of the choice. The Khazars deliberately aligned themselves with a faith that offered independence from both Byzantine and Islamic dominance. This was shocking for many reasons. Judaism was not a missionary religion. It did not seek converts. It had no empire backing it. In fact, Jews in the medieval world were often marginalized, scattered in diaspora communities. By embracing Judaism, the Khazars joined a tradition defined not by power, but by resilience. Chapter 4. Why Judaism? The Khazars' motives were likely both political and spiritual. Political independence. By rejecting both Christianity and Islam, the Khazars maintained their autonomy. They could not be accused of favoritism toward either Byzantium or the Caliphate. Instead, they became a neutral, independent force, respected but not dominated. Cultural distinction. Adopting Judaism gave the Khazars a unique identity. Surrounded by nations defined by the cross or the crescent, they stood out as something entirely different. Spiritual resonance. Judaism's emphasis on covenant, divine law, and chosenness may have appealed to the Khazars. A warrior elite seeking legitimacy could find power in the idea of being a people set apart by divine will. Whatever their precise reasoning, their decision was unprecedented. The Khazars became the only recorded medieval state whose rulers officially embraced Judaism. Chapter 5. Life in the Jewish Kingdom of the North. The Khazar conversion did not turn their entire empire into a Jewish state. Most of their subjects remained Christians, Muslims, or adherents of local pagan traditions. But the ruling elite, the court, and the administrative class practiced Judaism. Hebrew inscriptions, Jewish artifacts, and accounts from travelers confirm this. The Khazars maintained close contact with Jewish communities in the Islamic world, particularly in Baghdad and Persia. Jewish scholars corresponded with them, and the Khazars sent envoys and received merchants. For Jews living under persecution elsewhere, the idea of a Jewish kingdom in the north offered hope and pride. The Khazars did not stop being warriors and traders, but their faith gave them a distinct identity on the world stage. They were remembered in Jewish writings as protectors and even as a fulfillment of prophecy. In Christian and Muslim writings, they were often described with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and suspicion. Chapter 6. The Decline of the Empire. No empire, however bold, is eternal. By the 10th century, new powers were rising. The Rus, a federation of Norse and Slavic peoples, grew stronger in the north. In 965, Prince Sviatoslav of Kiev launched devastating attacks against the Khazars, sacking their cities and crippling their power. Meanwhile, trade routes shifted, weakening the Khazars' economic base. Without control of commerce and under pressure from multiple enemies, the Khazar state fractured. By the 11th century, their empire had largely vanished, though remnants of Khazar communities survived for some time. Why does the Khazar story matter so much? Because it represents the possibility of choice in a world often shaped by force. It challenges the assumption that religion spreads only through conquest or compulsion. Here was an empire that chose freely, even boldly, to embrace a faith that seemed powerless in worldly terms. The Khazars remind us that identity is not always dictated by geography or pressure. Sometimes it is carved out of independence, conviction, and strategy. Chapter 8. Lessons from a surprising choice. What can we learn from the Khazars' decision today? Faith as independence. By choosing Judaism, the Khazars demonstrated that faith can serve as a declaration of autonomy. Sometimes belief is not only spiritual but political. Power beyond empires. The Khazars aligned themselves with a tradition that had no armies, showing that influence is not always tied to military might. The complexity of history. Their story defies simplistic narratives. While many societies adopted the faith of their conquerors, the Khazars wrote their own path. The fragility of empires. Despite their power, the Khazars eventually fell. Yet their bold choice left a legacy remembered long after their empire vanished. Chapter 9. Remembering the Jewish Kingdom of the Steppe. Today, few physical traces of the Khazar Empire remain. Their cities lie in ruins, their language is largely lost, and their people disappeared into the currents of history. Yet the memory of their choice endures. In Jewish memory, the Khazars became a symbol of resilience and possibility. In Christian and Muslim chronicles, they were both admired and viewed with suspicion. In modern times, they have become a source of fascination, myth, and even controversy. But beyond all the speculation, one truth stands out. A warrior empire chose a new faith, and in doing so, reminded the world that even the strongest must sometimes look beyond power to find meaning. In the great theater of history, empires often rise and fall through bloodshed, conquest, and diplomacy. Yet, sometimes the most profound transformations do not come from a clash of swords, but from choices made deep within the soul of a people. One of the most remarkable of these choices took place in the steppes of Eurasia over 1,000 years ago. A warrior empire, feared for its cavalry and respected for its cunning, did something almost unimaginable. It chose a new faith, not one of the dominant powers pressing upon it, but a faith without armies, without empire, and without worldly prestige. This is the story of the Khazar Empire, and how its rulers' decision to embrace Judaism remains one of the great surprises in world history. Chapter 1. The Warrior Empire on the Steppe. To understand the Khazars' choice, we must first know who they were. Emerging in the 7th century, the Khazars were a Turkic-speaking people who built a powerful empire in the heart of Eurasia. Their land stretched from the Black Sea in the west to the Caspian Sea in the east, controlling key trade routes that linked Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. They were a people forged in war. Like other steppe empires, their power rested on cavalry, swift, disciplined, and devastating in battle. Yet they were more than raiders, they were empire builders. From their capital at Itil, located on the lower Volga River, the Khazars created a sophisticated state with a multi-ethnic population that included Turkic tribes, Slavs, Persians, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The Khazars were no minor player. At their height, they were a buffer between two great civilizations, the Christian Byzantine Empire to the west, and the Islamic Caliphates to the south and east. Their strategic position made them both indispensable and dangerous. Chapter 2. Standing Between Giants. To stand between Byzantium and the Caliphates was to live in constant tension. The Byzantines sought to spread Christianity and maintain influence over the north, while the Muslim Caliphates expanded rapidly after the rise of Islam, bringing vast territories under their banner. For the Khazars, aligning with either side might have seemed the logical choice. Many neighboring peoples converted to one of these two dominant religions. The Bulgars leaned toward Islam, the Rus eventually embraced Christianity, and countless others followed the path of the nearest superpower. Yet the Khazars hesitated. To adopt Christianity would risk becoming a Byzantine client state. To adopt Islam would risk being absorbed into the Islamic world. Neither option promised true independence. Chapter 3. A bold and unlikely choice. Here lies the great twist in history. Sometime in the 8th or 9th century, the Khazar ruling elite converted to Judaism. The details are debated, wrapped in legend and mystery. Some sources suggest that Jewish refugees and traders present in Khazar lands gradually influenced the royal court. Others point to a deliberate decision. By adopting Judaism, the Khazars could avoid being subordinated to either Byzantium or the Caliphates. One of the most famous accounts comes from medieval Jewish sources, which describe a debate at the Khazar court. Representatives of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism each presented their case before the Khagan, the Khazar ruler. In the end, the Khagan chose Judaism. Whether this account is literal or symbolic, the meaning is profound. The Khazars consciously chose a faith that placed them outside the rivalry of the great powers. Chapter 4. Why Judaism? The choice of Judaism was extraordinary. Unlike Christianity and Islam, Judaism had no empire to defend it, no armies to enforce it, and no missionary program to spread it. It was a minority faith, often persecuted, scattered across the world in diasporas. To embrace it was not to join the strong, but to align with the marginalized. Yet this was also the genius of the decision. By adopting Judaism, the Khazars secured their independence. They could not be accused of favoritism toward either Byzantium or the Caliphates. They became a neutral yet respected partner, able to trade, negotiate, and even play the two sides against each other. There may have been spiritual reasons as well. Judaism's emphasis on covenant, law, and chosenness might have resonated with a proud warrior elite seeking to define its destiny. To be part of a people chosen by God could provide both legitimacy and unity for a diverse empire. Chapter 5. The Empire After Conversion. The Khazar conversion did not mean every subject became Jewish. Most of the population remained Christian, Muslim, or pagan. But the ruling class, including the Khagan and his court, adopted Judaism, and Jewish law began to shape aspects of governance. Archaeological evidence, including Hebrew inscriptions and Jewish artifacts, supports this. The Khazars continued to thrive as middlemen of trade. Their empire sat at the crossroads of the Silk Road, connecting the riches of Asia with Europe. Merchants passed through their lands carrying silk, spices, furs, and slaves. The Khazars taxed and protected these routes, enriching themselves and making their empire essential to the global economy of the time. Their adoption of Judaism even gave them a unique identity in diplomatic relations. They became known across the medieval world as the Jewish Kingdom of the North, a curiosity that intrigued and unsettled their neighbors. Chapter 6. The Decline of the Khazar Empire. No empire lasts forever, and the Khazars were no exception. From the 10th century onward, they faced mounting pressure. The Rus, a rising power in the north, launched repeated attacks. The Byzantine Empire shifted alliances. The Islamic Caliphates fractured but still influenced the region. By the mid-10th century, the Khazar Empire was in decline. In 965, Prince Vyacheslav of Kievan Rus dealt a crushing blow by sacking the Khazar capital. Though the Khazars lingered in fragments for some time, their days as a major power were over. Yet their choice of faith continued to echo. The memory of a Jewish kingdom on the steppe lived on in Jewish, Christian, and Muslim writings. It became part of the folklore of exile and survival, a reminder that even in unlikely places, Jewish identity could thrive. Chapter 7. The Khazar Legacy and Controversy. The Khazar story has not remained confined to history books. It has sparked centuries of speculation and debate. Some theories, often exaggerated, claim that many Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the Khazars. Modern genetic evidence, however, suggests only a minor Khazar contribution to Jewish ancestry, if any. Still, the fascination persists. History reminds us that true power is not always measured by swords or conquests, but by the choices that shape identity and destiny. The decision of a warrior empire to embrace a new faith stands as one of the most remarkable moments in history, defying expectations, breaking boundaries, and leaving a legacy that still inspires curiosity today. If this story opened your eyes to a forgotten chapter of the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more hidden histories. Until next time, remember, the greatest victories are not always won on the battlefield, but in the heart. The physical empire was gone, but the memory of their shocking choice remained. Chapter 7. Echoes Through History. The Khazars became a legend. In Jewish tradition, they were remembered as proof that even a powerful kingdom could embrace Judaism. They were cited in letters and stories as a sign of divine favor and as encouragement to communities living under oppression. In Christian chronicles, they were sometimes admired as allies against Muslims, and at other times distrusted for their unusual faith. In Muslim writings, they were portrayed as both trading partners and dangerous rivals. In modern times, the Khazars have inspired fascination and controversy. Some theories, often exaggerated, claim that Ashkenazi Jews are largely descended from Khazars. Genetic evidence suggests otherwise, though there may have been limited intermingling. Still, the idea of the Khazar legacy has fueled debates about identity, belonging, and history. The echo of their decision remains powerful because it challenges expectations. Religion and history often spread through conquest, compulsion, or the prestige of empires. The Khazars remind us that faith could also be chosen freely, even defiantly. Chapter 8. Lessons from the Khazars' choice. What lessons can we draw from this shock that still echoes? Faith as resistance. The Khazars teach us that adopting a faith can be an act of resistance. Their conversion was not submission, but defiance, a way of saying, "We will not be absorbed." Power of the marginalized. By aligning with Judaism, the Khazars embraced a tradition of perseverance rather than dominance. This shows that strength is not always found in empires, but in survival. Complexity of identity. The Khazars demonstrate that identity is not fixed by geography or pressure. It can be reshaped through bold choices, even against the flow of history. Impermanence of power. Despite their independence, the Khazars eventually fell. Yet their decision outlived their empire, reminding us that legacies are not always measured by territory, but by ideas. Chapter 9. The Shock That Still Echoes. Why does the Khazar story still resonate today? Because it speaks to timeless themes: independence in the face of pressure, courage to choose the unexpected path, and the enduring question of how faith shapes identity. In a world that often forces conformity, the Khazars remind us of the power of standing apart. In a history dominated by empires, they remind us that the marginalized can leave lasting marks. And in a time when faith is often seen as a tool of politics, they remind us that it can also be an act of freedom. Their empire is gone. Their people are absorbed into the currents of history. But their choice to adopt a faith of exile and perseverance still astonishes. It still whispers across centuries that true courage may not lie in conquest, but in conviction. A kingdom remembered. The Khazar Empire rose as a warrior state and fell as all empires do. Yet what makes it unforgettable is not the size of its cavalry or the wealth of its markets, but the faith it chose. In rejecting both cross and crescent, in embracing a faith of wandering and resilience, the Khazars carved out a place in history that still echoes today. Their story challenges our assumptions about how religion spreads, how power operates, and how identity is shaped. It reminds us that history is not only written by conquerors, but also by those who dare to choose differently. The Khazars shocked the world once, and their shock, astonishing and defiant, still echoes through the corridors of history.